Bones in the Whitehouse. Thomas Jefferson's Mammoth by Candace Ransom. Illustrated by Jamie Christoph.
It's story time with Mr. Burnett. Story time with Mr. Burnett. It's bound to be something that you won't forget too soon.
Bones in the White House.
Thomas Jefferson's Mammoth by Candace Ransom. Illustrated by Jamie Christoph.
Long ago, tales like campfire smoke drifted across America. They hinted of a monster roaming territories west of the Mississippi River.
Thomas Jefferson heard these stories. Surveyors, traders, trappers staggered back from the wilds of Kentucky with enormous tusks and thrilling accounts of massive bones scattered on the ground. Huge ribs and shoulder blades stuck up from the blue-gray muck, they said. One man reported using gigantic bones as tent poles and stools. In 1781, America was still mostly vast wilderness. No one in the East knew what mysterious animals might wander in the far West.
Jefferson was enthralled. What brute could have left behind such mighty skeletons?
He itched to see those bones. He had always been curious. As a boy, he picked up shells as old as the rocks in the Blue Ridge Mountains. He wondered how relics of sea life came to be resting on a mountaintop in Virginia. That curious country boy grew up to write the Declaration of Independence and was governor of Virginia while America fought Britain to gain its freedom. But after America won the war, some across the Atlantic felt the former colony had little to offer. Jefferson knew the truth, and these giant bones would help him prove it. He decided to write a book that would tell the world America was a great country, full of great creatures. But describing an animal no living person had seen would not be easy. At the American Philosophical Society, where Jefferson and other men interested in science would meet, some believed the colossal tusks and leg bones being dug up out west belonged to an elephant. Some thought the whopping teeth belonged to a hippopotamus. Others argued the animal was both elephant and hippopotamus. In fact, it was a mastodon, but in Jefferson's time it became known as a mammoth, after a similar creature had been dug up in Siberia. In his book, Jefferson listed the mammoth along with moose, mountain lions, buffalo, and bears. He wrote that the newly discovered mysterious, large, big creature still exists in the northern parts of America. He added a chart listing the weights of American mammals. The space for the mammoth's weight was a blank. How much did an unknown animal weigh? If he could get his hands on a mammoth bone, he could figure it out.
Many of his friends owned bones from Big Bone Lick, a salty bog near the Ohio River in Kentucky. Prehistoric animals had come to lick the salt from the mud, gotten stuck, and died.
George Washington had a leg bone and a molar. Benjamin Franklin processed several specimens. Even the King of France displayed a femur, teeth, and a tusk in his private museum. Jefferson had no bones, only a bad case of mammoth fever.
Jefferson's friend George Rogers Clark lived near Big Bone Lick. Were it possible to get a tooth, he told Clark, it would particularly oblige me. General Clark tried to collect a thigh bone, but it broke as he dug it up. Offering to pay, Jefferson asked for any bones Clark could find. When the general hiked to the lick again, the ground was frozen solid. Nothing would budge.
Word spread about Jefferson's keen interest in the mystery animal. He was given a jumbo tooth that came from a salt marsh in southwestern Virginia. It was studded with comb-shaped points. Jefferson marveled at its heaviness and shape. Elephant molars, he knew, were flat-top for grinding plants. Was the mammoth a carnivore? He pictured a great meat-eating beast stampeding through his native state. He must have more bones. General Clark sent Jefferson a thigh bone. It was as tall as a 3-year-old child. Yet this first bone only fanned his mammoth fever. If he had a whole skeleton, he would know what the creature looked like.
In the spring of 1796, Jefferson received a package of fossils from a friend. It held strange leg and foot bones and, oddest of all, toe bones with giant claws.
The fossils did not belong to Jefferson's hoped-for mammoth, but a new beast he named Great Claw in a scientific essay. Jefferson thought the animal must be a wild cat, 3 times bigger than a lion. He felt certain this giant cat prowled uncharted forests along with the mammoth. In 1797, Jefferson was elected Vice President of the United States and President of the American Philosophical Society. He traveled to Philadelphia to accept both offices, carrying with him the great claw bones and his essay. It was an honor to be Vice President, yet he was more excited to reveal his scientific discovery. Society members blasted his ideas. Without a thigh bone, how could he know the size of the great claw? Why hadn't anyone ever seen one? Jefferson didn't back down, even when he learned he had been wrong, and that the great clawbone actually belonged to an ancient sloth. He believed in the possibility of more discoveries. If the mammoth wandered somewhere in the West, what else might be out there? As Society president, Jefferson pushed the Bone Committee to step up its research. They needed bones, lots of them. There's the ancient sloth, the Megalonyx jeffersoni. It's pretty cool to think about a giant sloth. We came up with that idea in another book about the prehistoric turtle, the fact that there used to be really giant things. Then, in 1799, a worker on John Masters' farm in Newburgh, New York, stabbed his shovel into the ground. It struck something hard. The bones of a monster. Lots of them. Jefferson tried to buy the Maston bones. The farmer refused to sell.
The following year, Jefferson became the 3rd President of the United States. He moved into the President's house, a grand new home on Pennsylvania Avenue in Washington, D.C., which later became known as the White House. But he didn't forget about his mammoth. A complete skeleton would draw worldwide attention to America's natural wonders. At Jefferson's urging, a fellow society member, Charles Wilson Peel, went to the Maston farm, where he was successful in buying the bones. Peel returned to Philadelphia to assemble the skeleton, adding wooden parts in place of the missing skull top, lower jaw. It measured 17 feet long and 11 feet high at the shoulder, weighing over 1,000 pounds.
On Christmas Day, 1801, the mammoth stood in a special room of the American Philosophical Society building. Lit by oil lamps after dark, the hulking creature dwarfed a tiny mouse skeleton posed by its foot to highlight its monster's bulk. There's a mouse skeleton. People flocked to see the astounding attraction. For 75 cents, they could gawk at, as Peel's poster trumpeted, the bones of the largest of terrestrial beings. Just a note, 75 cents was a lot of money in 1801, and that's why I believe, if you look, it's all fancy people looking at it, because who else has got that kind of money to spend looking at something? Still, amazing at the time.
Suddenly, the whole country caught mammoth fever. Anything oversized was branded mammoth. Newspapers sprouted accounts of a 20-pound mammoth radish, mammoth bread for sale, and a mammoth eater, a man who devoured 42 eggs in 10 minutes. Townspeople in Cheshire, Massachusetts, sent Jefferson a mammoth cheese, weighing 1,235 pounds, on New Year's Day, 1802. Jefferson opened his house to the public. He greeted the cheese-nibbling visitors, but his thoughts turned west. The United States needed room to grow, he believed, and soon it would. With the 1803 Louisiana Purchase, 828,000 square miles sold by France to America, the country doubled in size, becoming a mammoth nation. So keep in mind, the United States started out here, and this was all not part of the United States. And Jefferson purchased this. Later we learned that Lewis and Clark got famous exploring it and finding all kinds of stuff.
In 1804, Jefferson sent Meriwether Lewis and William Clark to explore the West. Oh, sorry, spoiler alert, I guess I just talked about that. Bring back bones, he instructed them, and keep an eye out for a living mammoth. Jefferson asked Lewis to stop at Big Bone Lick on the way and send back bones that had recently been dug up, but the boat carrying the fossils to Washington wrecked, and Jefferson's bones sank to the bottom of the Mississippi River. By now, his political enemies jeeringly called him Mr. Mammoth. Jefferson didn't care. When Lewis and Clark returned, he sent Clark to Big Bone Lick to look one more time. Clark's first report was disappointing. The salt marsh had been picked over by fossil hunters. But the next report glowed with good news. He had collected 300 bones and teeth. What's more, they were on their way to Washington.
On March 7th, 1808, 3 crates arrived at the president's house. Jefferson had them opened in the East Room, where the former First Lady Abigail Adams had once hung laundry. This was now the Bone Room. Jefferson spread out more than 300 fossils on the floor. Some belonged to other animal species, but most were from mammoths. Teeth, tusks, one 10 feet long, ribs, leg, and foot bones, and 4 jaw bones and 4 pieces of skulls. All the bones of the American mammoth had now been found.
At the end of his second presidential term, Jefferson retired and went home to Virginia. For years, he had dreamed of building a university with the study of science at its heart. The foothills of the Blue Ridge Mountains, where mammoths once lumbered, would be a good place. Thomas Jefferson died in 1826, a year after making his dream come true. His grandson donated most of Jefferson's fossils to the new University of Virginia. Sometime in the middle of the century, however, the bones were lost. There is no record of them after 1848, and to this day, no one knows the location of his collection.
Maybe someday a student will stumble on a dusty box labeled Mr. Jefferson's Bones. This curious young scholar might open the lid, setting free the spirits of Thomas Jefferson and his beloved mammoth, so they may drift through unknown territory like smoke from ghostly campfires.
Okay, so there's a lot of information on this page. I just read it. It took over 8 minutes. I'm going to summarize it for you. Jefferson in history. Jefferson really liked science. He recorded information, always trying to learn things, very interesting. Was fascinated with paleontology, was kind of made fun of for his love for paleontology. He also wrote the Declaration of Independence and was a big advocate of learning and enlightenment and freedom for all men, claimed that all men were created equal, but ironically he owned slaves. He had slaves around his home and even had children with one of his slaves, Sally Hemings. That's famous. You can look that up. Everybody knows that. Also, it's noted that the Louisiana Purchase was a great addition to the United States, but there were Native Americans living there, and it didn't really turn out so great for them. You can read more about that there. After he retired from public office, his interest turned to the creation of the University of Virginia. Great school. He saw it as a place in which all branches of science should be taught in the highest degree. Though Jefferson reached the highest office in the land, President of the United States, he never believed that he knew all there was to know. Mammoth or mastodon? The creature referred to throughout this story as a mammoth was in fact a mastodon. Mastodons belong to the family of mammals called Proboscideae. The mammoth was from the same family but was a different species. They were first found and studied beginning in 1739 in Big Bone Lick, Kentucky. The term mastodon didn't come about until 1806, which was much later. Jefferson knew the creature as a mammoth, but it turns out it was a mastodon. What happened to the mastodons? They first appeared 27 to 30 million years ago and became extinct about 10,000 years ago. One theory is that climate change caused temperatures to rise and altered the ecosystem, making it inhospitable to Ice Age creatures. That's true of a lot of things that kind of disappeared or became rare or extinct after the Ice Age receded. Plants that many species ate no longer existed. Also, people showed up, so that probably had something to do with it. Most likely, multiple factors caused the extinction of those animals. Meanwhile, we can enjoy Asian and African elephants, their last living relatives. A lot of information in that book. I enjoyed it very much. I hope you did, and thank you, my friends, for joining me.